Well, I'm back again, and my name is Carlene Lagrou, and I am going to be your instructor for the next, hopefully, 40 minutes. But they keep saying it's probably not going to be that short. This is going to be water level 2 of watercolor, and so I've already given you all the basics on how to put your palette and everything, so we're going to skip that today. We are sponsored by Gaylord Council of the Arts, the Michigan Council for the Arts and Cultural Affairs, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And I want to thank them all for that. It's so nice of them to do this for us. Okay, I'm going to start, and I will show you what we're doing and the process that I started doing it. This is the project that we're going to work on today. It's the Mackinac Island Light, and as you're going into the island on the boat, you pass by it. So that being said, I'm going to show you the process how I started, and we're going to paint it at a different view. We're going to do it long way. So when I look at a photo that I want to paint, is this good here? I say, okay, I liked the photo. I liked the position of the lighthouse and the little buildings out there, but you as the artist can edit anything you want. So what I did with this is I did several sketches, one horizontal and one vertical. So, and I decide which one I like the best, and I can move things around. I can bring it up closer, eliminate things, or I could expand it if I wanted to. So what I chose to do is just use one of these little buildings here, and I did one and this one. So I decided I preferred this one, but as a sample to show you how the horizontal would work out, I did one in advance. So today we'll be doing this one. So that being said, I'm going to put this back here, and hopefully you can see the colors and everything while I'm working. And just to show how you can edit a photograph, I did this painting from this photograph. Now, when you're painting, I like to say that you should always exaggerate, enhance the colors, change it up. You know, nobody knows where a tree is growing or what color it is from your photograph. Nobody cares. So in this case, I decided to make it fall because it's more vibrant. The colors will pop. You'll see it better. I did change the shapes where the everything is. I eliminated, and you can see how you can eliminate all the little pieces and all the little clutter. When you try to get too complicated, sometimes it gets too busy and it's hard to read the painting. So it's best if you simplify. There's no leaves. There's no definition in any of the background trees, especially when in the foreground and the background. Simplify as much as you can. You know these are trees back there. You know it's fall. And you can see the difference from how everything there is defined. Simplify it. Get rid of all the little stuff. You can do indications of little things, little fences, but you don't have to have everything in your painting. So always think, how can I even the buildings I've simplified, I've taken things out. You read it as the barns, as this, your eye will change everything that it needs to see it. Okay, so we have that. Okay, so now we've decided on which one we want. I have the value scale, so I know where the darks are, I know where the lights are. And like I said the last time, that value is more important than a lot of other things you can do in your painting. That's what shows you where your center of interest is. This is where I want you to look. Not here, because it has the darkest and the lightest values in there next to each other. All right, so that being said, we can start on our painting. And the other thing is, when you're looking at one thing more, when you're looking at your reference photograph, have something like a little mat. So you can do this. You can crop where you want that picture. You can say, do I want it long? Do I want the horizon low? Do I want the horizon high? So this kind of thing is helpful. If you put that horizon line right in the middle of your painting, It's not as interesting as if you have a low horizon or a higher horizon. It's just one of those things that through history has been decided. And when you look at it, it just gives it more interest because you either see shadows, you see something there, or if the horizon is low, you have that big expanse of sky, a blank kind of canvas where you have your eye to settle. It's kind of important to have places where your eye can rest. You don't want the whole painting busy. You want to have these areas that are kind of a resting place for your eye. And it also works as a negative space. Negative spaces are just as important as the object you're looking at that you want your center of interest. Anything that is around your center of interest is a negative space. So you always want to think of those as shapes also. This is a shape going around the building. This is a shape here between the two structures. This is a shape here. So always think of where the shapes are and how I can place them to make them more interesting. If this were right in the middle here, like, let me do this, I think. If that were right in the, no, that's not going to work. All right, if I placed this house, the light, right in the middle, it's less interesting to look at for the viewer than adding things on the side and having it off center. So this is off center and the horizon is lower in this case. So, but you can see if I do that, it's more like a portrait. And a portrait is a whole new experience for a painter. A portrait would be like if you have a vase of flowers, just one object where you want the person to look at. And it's obvious where the center of interest is there. But if you're making a complete landscape or almost any kind of composition, even if it's an abstract, you want your center of interest to be slightly off center or higher or lower. Okay, that being said, let's move along. All right, so we have all those decisions finished. We have our darks, our lights, and we can see where we want everything. So now we can start painting. I did have, I put my drawing on here, and I think that's a good spot to see it. So you can see I have my lighthouse high, I have it off to the left, and I have all this is water. So that's how I'm going to try and create my center of interest. And also, I'm going to change the colors slightly. You know, all this is kind of monochromatic. It's kind of boring. I do have a dark and a light, but it doesn't have a lot of pizzazz. When I did this one, I changed the coloring up, as you can see. I brightened this. I made the shadow a little more, or basically the reflection, not the shadow. I made the reflection a little more vivid. I changed the color of the sky. I have a little bit of pink at the bottom to pick up some of the reds and some of the reds here. So the water has more color. I have more color in the sky. And just to keep some of this background, I put some birds in the sky to give it more interest. So it breaks up this vast space too also. All right, so as we go along, I can change things even more. And I always say it's only paper, and you as the artist can change anything you like. All right, so now I'm going to start my background colors. I'm going to start with my lightest color first. In watercolor, that's kind of a rule of thought. So you start with your lightest color and work towards your darkest. So I'm going to start just all my light background colors real quickly. When I do this, I take my palette and I make sure that my paint is all diluted so I don't have any paint pieces. Like you can see right here, that's thick. That's pure pigment. So that would come out as streaks on my paper. So I want to make sure that's all diluted. So that's why I would do that first. Okay, now this is a little bit of a rich color. I think I'm gonna water it down just a little. All right, I have my drawing on the paper. I don't put in a lot of details. I put in the basic structures. And the drawing is light. Now you have that option of, a lot of people don't like the lines showing in their painting. They're drawing their basic drawing on there. So if you do it light like this, the lines, once you get the painting on, you won't see them. I basically don't mind if I do have some of my pencil marks showing. It never bothered me. If you look at the old masters in their watercolors, their lines show a lot. So that's not a problem. You can do it either way. If your lines show, fine. If they don't, fine too. But on this one, I did do it a little lighter just to have that contrast. Now on this painting, I did a light background and I made the building darker. So I'm going to change up this one to a darker sky and make this lighter. So it's going to have that different bit of contrast for you. Okay, so we'll put this one back aside if you can see it. Well, you can't see it in the background, so I'll just leave it here. But I don't want to splatter paint on it. I'm kind of a sloppy painter. All right, so I've mixed up a big puddle of my paint here, and I think I want to change up the color a little. I'm going to add a little Indian red in a little section here so I can change that color on my palette. So you can see that I have a darker and a lighter, but it's the same paint. All right. So I'm going to start out with the lighter color, and I'm going to put it kind of all along. And I'm going to be careful not to get any of it. I'm going to keep that paper dry where my building is. Then with another brush, I'm going to take this line and I'm going to soften it with clean water. I'm just going to soften it so that it doesn't have a hard line at my horizon, but I'm still going to be mindful of my buildings. I eliminated one of the one of the smaller buildings just to keep it a little simpler. And I'm going to let some of that paint just roll on up. With watercolor, you can manipulate your paint pretty easily. So as you can see, I can move that paint around. I can do anything I want. I can have that paint swirl. I can have it do whatever. So right now I'm just going to keep it kind of like that. And I'm going to put the rest of the sky in. Now I'm going to paint around anything that I don't want to have a blue in. The flag, there's a little flag here coming up, so I want to keep that white. I want to keep it clean. So I'm going to paint around it. Once I get all this in, I can add more color. I can add, as long as my paint is wet, I can keep adding color to it. Here's my horizon line on that side. Okay, so my bad. We're going to try and pick that paint up around the flag a little bit. And we'll have to work that in with a little white paint later. So I have this nice rich color. And now you always remember, watercolor dries a little lighter when it's dry than when you put it on wet. So it's not going to be quite this dark. So at this point I'm going to add some of that where I put the Indian red in to give it a little contrast here and there. I'm just going to put it in along the top. So my horizon will be a little lighter sky than the top. You can see the value change now. This is a little lighter than there. I'm going to have that little bit of a change of value. And when this is dry, I can go over and do it again. All right, so while I'm doing this, I've got this. I'm going to pick up some of this here because I had a tree line in there. But the tree line is going to be darker, so it won't matter. But I'm going to lighten all this. And part of watercolor for me, and every artist does things differently, is picking up paint too. So if I see I need a change, clean tissue and just blot it up very gently. I need to straighten this line out a little. Blot that a little bit so it's a little change of value at the horizon. And then this is water. So I want that light. A little bit lighter than. All right. So now I'm gonna go back to my big brush. And then this is water below. Whenever you can, whenever you're comfortable, you know, the bigger the brush, the looser you're going to paint. So it depends on if you're a very realist painter or if you just want to have it a little bit looser here and there. Now, I'm gonna let some of this paint just roll down because I want my sky to be a little lighter than, or my water, I'm sorry, a little lighter than the sky. So I'm going to take a little spray, and always spray your water. When any water you're spraying, spray it so you know what you're getting. So you're not getting a hard spray or a soft, too soft or too hard. So I want that just to kind of drip down normally. All right, so I have my background colors in. And I can add to this anytime I want to. And I can add to the sky anytime I want to. So at this point, I will let this dry for a couple minutes. I'll use a hair dryer, and that will ensure that I won't bleed into anything else. And every once in a while, it's best to let things dry up. All right, so we're going to put it on pause here for a minute, and I'll hit it with the hair dryer. Okay, I have my paper dry. It's one thing when you're drying. If you have a lot of water like I have, whoops, sorry. If you have a lot of water on your paper and you're drying it, don't hold it here or pick it up and let it dry, because that paint is going to move and then it's not going to be where you want it. If it's very wet, hold it higher up and don't blow real hard. Put it on a lower setting so the paint stays. If you see the water moving, it's going to change what you have. So be conscious of how you do use your hair dryer. Okay, I put that down. All right, so I have my sky. I have the reflections in here. So we're going to start putting some color in our buildings. I think first I'm going to start with a little bit of the tree line. I'm going to take just some green, and I'm going to add it to my blue sky here. So I'm using the same palette. I'm using the same colors. I don't want to change that. And I'm going to put a little bit of that Indian red in there. Just a bit to darken the foliage. So you can see what a nice rich color that makes. I want it darker and a little bit change of color than the sky. So I'm just going to put that tree line back in. And this just gives it a nice interruption from all the sky. I'm making that another value change. And the nice thing about a landscape is there's, you can't screw it up. There's no right, there's no wrong. A tree is a tree. Water is water. It's going to be all the same.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, it is pretty easy. You're right. So I've got that little bit of tree line back in here. I'm going to go right up to the building. Then I'm going to take clean water and I'm going to soften the edge. I don't want that to be that harsh. It is in the distance, but I want it to look like it is in the distance. So once you soften that edge and let that paint just kind of flow where it wants to, you can see how you'll get the little different patterns. And I have a lot of water here and I'm just adding here and there, and I'm going to get somewhat of a little bit of blossom. And I kind of like that. In some cases it's not a good idea, but in this case I want it. So I can get it. So when it dries, you're going to see a little bit of right here, you're beginning to see that little where the water is pushing back on the paint, so it's moving it. So I'm getting like a multiple tree line, maybe different shapes of trees in there, and it's all natural. It's just with the water. I'm going to put just a little bit of that tree line here because it can't end that abruptly. So as it works out into the big water, where's my horizon? Got to get that horizon in the All right, and I'm going to soften this edge now just a little. It's just clean water. I don't want it to be an even line. All right, so now I have that background color in there. I'm going to put a little bit of this dark, because a little bit of this color is going to, and here's my reference photo. If you can, maybe I can just leave it on the, well, that's not going to work. All right, so I'm going to put a little bit of the same green around the little house at the bottom. Oh, I got it here in my, and there's some of the darks in here. Let this dry out. Soften some of these edges because it's a landscape. We don't want a lot of hard edges in it. All right, so I'm beginning to like that a little bit. Now I'm going to put a little bit, because this is a little bit of a sandy area in front of it. If you can see that, there's a little bit of it looks like a sandy area, and then a lot of rocks and some darker rocks and foliage and green things growing. So just to get these background colors in, we're going to get some of this going. I've got, and I'm going to add a little bit of that blue to dull it down, a little bit of the green. And I'm still using all the same colors, so I'm not changing the colors of my palette. I'm going to use, this is very limited palette. So I have a little bit of that beachy thing going on. little bit of the sand. I'm going to soften a little bit of these edges. All right, then I'm going to add some little bit of dark here, and I'm going to use a Paynes gray. And periodically, because you know paint dries up, I give it a spritz so I have soft paint. If you don't keep your paint soft, you're going to get this hard little blobs, and you're going to be working too hard to get pigment out, and you're going to have to work twice as hard. So if you can see, here's a scrap. You can see I can go into any of my wells now, and I get real paint. You can see that color. If that were hard, if I didn't spritz it every once in a while so that pigment is loose, it would come out more like this. You know, you'd be fighting to get that color on your brush. You'd be screwing your brushes up and working harder to get that rich color. So that's the secret of that. Keep your paint, and don't be afraid to use paint. I mean, it's going to dry up in your tube and you're never going to use it. So don't be afraid to put that pigment out. You have a top for your palette, and that's right here. This keeps the paint from drying out when you're not using it. Every once in a while, just take the cover off and spritz it if you haven't used it. Sometimes you might get a little mold, but you just pick it up with a paper towel or a brush and get rid of it, and you're all set. But that's one way where you can put the paint out and you can use it. You can also use the top for another mixer to mix more paint. All right, so now I'm going to take my Indian red here, the color I had here, and I'm going to put a first coat on my green, on my light. So the Lighthouse has, you know, there are certain things you can't change the colors of. The Lighthouse has, you know, darks and lights in here. So we're gonna make this the dark. And where I have the darks, I can go over like the windows and the doors because it's darker than my Indian red. So I can paint right over it and then put my dark over that, and it's all set. Now I'm leaving that little piece of dry paint just so I know where the edge of that building turns around. So when I'm doing my next step, I'll be really aware where the building is, the face and the side. And also the same thing with my tower. And I can still see my lines under there. What you want to be careful of is when you're doing this, if you get paint on your hand and you do, oh, that's not good. So I'm going to put paper towel over there so I don't accidentally put something on my water where I don't want it. On the ground part, it really wouldn't matter too much. All right, now let's do the light. And all the little things in here, you know, like the railings and that can be done at the last minute. And even now, I'm going to try not to go into my sky because it can still bleed a little bit, even when it's dry. So I'm going to take a little bit of my blue now, and I'm going to add it to my Indian red. And I'm going to paint the side. I'm going to make the front of the building a little lighter than the sides. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that shadow in now. So I have that little bit of value change in the building. And right up here, this is a little wet yet. I'm going to let that sit for a minute. Maybe I should work, because this was dry. I'm going to put a little bit of dark just coming up the middle and let that paint just bleed to the edges. As I get closer to the ground, I'll have more shadow. Let that dry a little bit, because now I have like three dark windows that, my sketches would probably be more useful. The three dark windows that come up, and these I can put them all in after. And the white, that will have to be done by itself. And then the flag is over there yet. So now I'm going to take my Paynes gray, and I'm going to start adding some of those darks. I'm going to treat this as like, I'm not going to worry about putting shingles in. It's going to be a shape. I don't want to. And it's nice to have, well, maybe I'll use the ruler. My brush is wet, I don't want to. It's called a maul stick, but it's normally a piece of oak that doesn't bend or move. And it's got a little bit of padding on the edge, and you can use it to brace your hand and not touch your paper or your canvas. Because if you're painting with oil paint or acrylic, that's wet. So you have that added safety. And I'm going to take this now, leave it there, and I'm going to take a little finer brush to just fill in a couple little edges and cracks. I can get this in. And even with that darker sky, you can see it's a value change. On the bottom of this. But it's nice to have, keep something a little firm, a ruler, or if you want to invest in a maul stick, that works out just as well too. And then this down here, I don't want to get too close to the building yet because this is still really wet. So I'm going to try and keep a little bead of white there, and I can fill that in later. And I'll put my railings in later also. There's railings here, and a little bit of, and we can do some, I'll do that later too. All right, so we're getting some of the basics done here. I'm gonna let that dry a little bit and do some work in here. So these are a little bit of rock formations that are down here. So we're gonna put a little bit of that in. And the foundation of the light, that goes in here. So these are all, you know, and the finishing, what I like to call the calligraphy of the work, you know, that goes after it's all dry and you have a little bit of an easier problem than trying to do those fine little things, the details, when it's wet, because that just, it'll just bleed all over and you'll have a little bit of a problem. So you're beginning to see part of the lighthouse. It's showing up a little more now. And I'm going to take a little bit of this, put it in with there, and make some more of the ground. And none of this has to be all that exact. You know, ground is like a... And I like to have some bleed into each other. You know, it's kind of like, it helps it out sometimes. Like that foundation can just bleed right into the rocks in places. It's okay with me. And it makes it look like it's sitting down and connected really nicely. So that's coming out okay. All right, I'm gonna do the white. I know white is white, but in this case, white is never white. There's 50 colors and shades of white between, you know, a little bit of blue, a little bit of everything in it. So we're gonna paint that white a little bit. I'm gonna take some of the yellow that I used. And you don't need a lot, but you're going to have color in places. So let's see how we can do this. Let's put a little, no, it's too, I want it a little brighter than that. So we're going to take that out. See, you can move watercolor fairly easily if you work at it. All right, so I have a little, just a little brighter of the yellow where the moonlight, whatever you want to call, would hit it maybe. I'm going to pick up some of the color because I just want a hint in most places. I don't want it to hit you in the face. I want a little bit in that square. Can you see okay, Joe?
Yeah. You don't realize that white isn't white until you really take the time to look at it.
Well, if you leave it with nothing, it would look like a hole in your paper. So you have to put something on it. Even your whitest whites, you know, you don't want to leave it just pure white in 90% of the cases. If you're working, you know, you want those little bit of highlights, like I'm going to leave some of it where it will be whiter. But in most cases, you know, your mind will read it as white anyway, so let's put just a little bit over here. Okay, now on the side, I'm going to take some of the blue and really water it down. I want it to be really, really light. Let's use the extra little bit of palette, because I want some of those shadows on the side of the building, but they can't be as dark as anything else. So it's going to be really light, and then I can always add more. So you can see how it's it's pushing it back. So you know it's going back. You can add a little bit more just underneath. I think that roof is dry, kinda. So I'm going to add just a little more color right under the roof where there would be a shadow. And maybe a little, we have to put some here. I'm going to use a smaller brush for that though. So where the tower meets the roof line here, I want it to be darker. So it's giving it a shape, it's giving it a form. And that's what we're going to do in a lot of the places to give it its big deal. And I'm going to make a little bit of that darker in here. And I'm going to add a little more of that dark on this side. Put some extra little just dabs and dots here and there to give it a little extra interest. Let me see if that's dry. It's still a little wet to be working there. We got to let that dry a little bit yet. Okay, I'm going to take some of this blue now, and I'm going to put it in the lighthouse. Because you're going to see some of that sky through the windows of the light. So that's got its... Well, we're letting that dry a little. We'll put some color on the pump house or whatever it is. And I don't want to put too much detail in the pump house here because, you know, that's just what it is. It's a little pump house and it doesn't have to have a lot of darken under the roof. Maybe a little darker there, here and there. All right, let's put a little bit of this color. And you know, when you're painting, it's important to step back every once in a while and look and see what you've done to know what you need to add. Because there's always, you know, when you step back and you step away from your painting, it gives you a fresher eye. You're looking at it and you're saying, oh yeah, I should have done that. And another way of looking at it is reverse in a mirror. take it up and look at it in the mirror in reverse. And your mistakes just go, oh, look at me, here I am. I'm in front. So I'm just adding a little texture here and there. Okay, now for the fun part, you're going to see this. What I'm going to do is put reflections in the water from this and that. Anything that has a strong color. A reflection is always straight down from your object. A shadow moves with the light in the sun. So always remember that. If you're putting a reflection, it's straight down from your object. A shadow will move with light. So we have a dark sky, so we're not going to have much of a shadow other than in the buildings here. We'll add more as it dries, and I can do that. But the reflection will stay pretty much. So we're going to do that now with a bigger brush. And I'm going to take my Indian red. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit richer color. I'm going to take my spray bottle again, but make sure you know what you're getting from your spray bottle. Because I can adjust this to make a hard line. I can adjust it to make a soft line. So now I'm going to take that and I'm just going to hit the bottom so that reflection runs down. And I can add more paint. And I think I will because I want a little more. We're going to add a little bit of the roof color. And we'll put a little bit here for the light. And I'm going to put a little bit more of this in here. Ooh, see, that's what I mean by pigment. You don't want that. Let's clean my brush out. Let's see if we can pick it up. And then this is darker here, so we'll put some of that blue in there too. This is Paynes Gray, and it is, put a little bit along here, along the edge. And Paynes Gray has a blue cast to it, or you can get it with a taupe cast also. This is the blue cast. So what I'm going to do, get rid of that raw pigment. I'm going to make it just a little darker at the shoreline. Let some of that run. And I'm going to let some of that run out and just collect the water. Just collect the water. So now I'm going to have to let this dry. And I'm going to put a little bit where the house is. A little bit on top. So now I have a little bit of that too. I'm going to control a little bit of that bleeding. Wipe my board off a little bit. But I want to keep this flat. I don't want to have this all running everywhere. So right here about there, I have a lot of white. So what I'm going to do is just pick up a little bit of the shadow where it'll be a little lighter. And I can do this again if I decide I want more. And I think I would like a little more red in there. And I want to soften this. I don't want a hard edge anywhere. And we could put a couple little ripples. All right, I'm gonna let that dry for a minute now, and I'll work on this little, whoops, don't wanna do that. Okay, I'm gonna put a roof on here. And if you kind of move around the painting, you know, one part can start drying while the other part is still wet. And if you don't wanna do that, then it's best to, you know, stop and do a hairdryer thing. But you can see how you can work the whole painting at one time. I'm going to get the smaller brush. We'll put a little more of that. Let's put, but you know, and you can see I'm not using a lot of different colors. I'm just adding, mixing all the same colors back together. While that dries, I'm going to have to use a hair dryer here in a minute. Get this all dry to finish it. If I were in my studio and I were doing this, I would just go make a cup of tea, have some water, have lunch, and let it dry naturally. But I'm going to try and get this somewhat finished up for you guys in a reasonable amount of time here. Okay, let's just put a little dark right here. And we have, all right. Okay, I'm gonna let this dry for a minute. I'm gonna blow it and pick it back up. And we're almost ready to do some of the fine details. But I need this dry before I start doing anything else in here, and I need a lot of this dry yet. Okay, so I'm gonna stop for a minute and here blow it and get it all dry. We're back, and it's pretty dry, so I'm going to work on the top half now while this finishes up its last little bit of drying. Let me see what kind of brush I want. I'm going to start working on a little more up here because this is pretty dry. So let's get this. Okay, I'm going to do a little linear work here. So now I can fill in where I left that little bit of a dry line and put a little more detail in there. And it has a rail all the way around it. With a little wall on top. And you know, these little details, they're important. All right, let's do this side. Walkway. Okay, and I don't want that to be real prominent. So, where'd my paper towels go? I'm going to lighten these up a little.
Are you just using some clear water and picking up?
I'm just, yeah. I don't want them to be quite that dark. So I'm going to pick up a little bit on the top here too, where I'm going to get a little bit of a light, so you get a little more shaping to it. Let's put in a little shadow in here. I'm going to disrupt it a little bit. Put a little bit of maybe a dark on the top. And then when that dries, we'll put a little bit of an indication of a light. Is there anything else in that? I'm going to add just a couple more little details. And maybe I don't care if they're there or not, just to and part of painting is as I end up picking up lights, I bring the lights back in, so you can see where, it's really quite versatile. And even like in here, in the little ball, it's going to have light catching it. So I'm going to lighten it up a little. And it gets a little bit more of a highlight that way. So you get more texture and you get a value change, and you're getting, a little more substance to it. All right, so let's see if we can put that flag in. See how good I am at this. All right, we're going to put the flagpole in chunk here. Is there a little blob on top of the flagpole? Yeah, there might be. We'll put a little blob on top. Now what I'm going to do, because I did exactly what I told you not to do, is paint over the flag, we're going to have to use some white paint.
I painted over mine too.
Then you need a little white paint also. Oh, and Belle didn't. She didn't paint over her flag.
Good for you.
Yay. We have two people here helping my paint, my granddaughter and my good friend. Let's see how we want this flag to go, because we can always paint over it. It's going to be a little bit of a... That's going to be dark blue, so chunk chunk. And then I'll just add the red and the blue, and we'll have a flag. And, this can be very sketchy. It doesn't have to be, it's just an indication of a flag. Everybody will know what it is. I'm going to put a little bit of red in this blue, and that little bit of an Indian red, just to make it a little duller. So there's the stars. Let's pick a little bit of it up. Now we'll put the red in. And like I say, it doesn't have to hit you on the head with every detail. I'll blob some of that up and see what happens. Do you need white? Yes, please. Do you need some white belly? See? I'm going to try and brighten those in between up so it's not so blue in there. And you know, I think we'll go do the windows now, see how that comes out. This is dry. Let's put a little indication of a light. So I'm just gonna, you know, and even in the light in the house, it doesn't have to be like hit you over the head with it. All it has to do is be some kind of shape in there to, you know, to change up the everything around it. When that dries, we can put a little lights back in. I'm going to bring that just right down to the rail because nobody cares. We're going to put a little shadow underneath. All right, now these windows here are pretty dark. Let me see. I'm going to use different brush. Brush. Go back to this one. See if that makes a cleaner line. All right, and I'm going to put a little detail in here. I think there was one in the... I'm going to make it a little bit wider, put like a frame kind of on it. Now, these are the places where, if I were home, I would probably spend a little more time being a little more thoughtful. But that being said, we're having at it. Okay, so up here I have to make my roof there too. And I'm just trying to decide. We'll do it freehand and see what happens, huh? Okay. I'm going to make sure I have my point on my brush so it's not, there's not a wild hair somewhere. Okay, so I have that tree line, that roof line there. And I'm going to do this edge here. And I'm just going to put a little more color here and there on the roof. just so it's not just one. All right, now I'm going to put a little bit of shadow under here. Let's put in these little windows. There was one here. And there was a door here. Now you can see where all this comes in after it's dry, and you can put it in. So I could paint that whole thing, and I knew that this was going to be a darker color, and that red underneath would be a complement to it because I'm using the same colors everywhere. So I know that it works. All right, so now let's put a little more into this building. And this is like, you can do all this at the end. And here's a door in there. We're going to make that door go right up into the... Let's pick up a little bit of that. Just to make that stand out a little more. I don't want to make the background darker, so I'm going to make the roof darker. You have to have a little bit of a change here and there. And I don't want this roof and those trees to be the same value, so I'm putting a little darker on the roof. We'll make those bushes come right up too. All right, now I'm going to lighten some of these edges here. Whoops, wrong side. Because they are going to catch some of the light. Lighten this back here a little bit. And I'm going to lighten a little bit across the tops. So you know that's the edge. But see, when I pick up the colors, you get that value change again. So, I know I can pick it up. So that's the thing that you practice on. So you know what to expect out of your paint. Okay, so on this door, I want it to be not all the same value too. So I'm going to pick up just a little bit of color here and there. Give it more interest, and that's all I'm doing is just giving it a little something. I don't want to hit you over the head with detail, but I do want to put something in there so you can see that it's a door. All right. Now I'm going to still, is this all dry? This is all dry. All right, let's put this in. So I'm putting more shadows in and giving all this a little more interest too. You know, the white just can't stay all white. It has to have some value changes here and there. I'm going to darken the inside of that just a little. Let's make that so it's not hitting you in the head. Let's give this that little. So picking up is just as important as putting down. You know, never think that you can't add or subtract anything. Watercolor is a little harder to, you have to think about it a little bit more, but it's not any harder to work with than any other medium once you get the hang of it. Ooh, we got to put those windows in too. I think I need a little water here and there. So in this whole painting, I've used a Paynes gray, I've used Indian red, cobalt blue, and green. And like it's kind of like an emerald green. In all different proportions, the same colors. So we have one that comes right up here. And I you know, I'm not all that. I think that had, just to add a little interest to it. I think it had, yeah, it does. We're just going to add like little, I don't know what you would call these. They're probably moldings and trim. And see what I'm saying where you don't want to touch it? I did. So you just take some, and the nice thing about this is in the water, so it can't hurt much. So we'll just make a couple waves here. And I still want more color in the water, so I'm going to do this one more time with the Indian red. I want more contrast. I want that to be a pretty strong value change. And I'm going to give it a little spray. All right, now I'm going to do one more thing. You know, I'm telling you to watch what you're doing with your spray. So I think you can see this here. So I'm doing that so I get a gentle spray on there. I can do this. Hey, which way do I go? I want a hard line. See how that is? And I can make some glows in my water. I probably should let it dry a little more before I did that, but you can see how you can do that. And I can do it again when it dries, but we're running long on time. So I don't want to take too long here. And I want to do that again. I like that little bit more red. That's making me feel happy. Putting me in a happy place. Happy, happy. Just where sometimes when you're doing water, these reflections are some of the most important parts. Okay, now I want to put a little bit, this dry. We'll put a little bit of shadow here where okay, now we're gonna I still think I would like a little more red, a little stronger. Now, other than doing that, the spray, I can, let me see if I can get rid of a little bit here. That was awesome. But see how easy it is to change when you don't want something? I want to keep the sides a little simpler maybe. And when you rub your paper, you're going to bruise it. So what you want to do is be gentle with it when you're picking up. Normally blot more than scrape, even when you're drawing, when you're putting your little bit of sketch on. You want to keep that, the least you erase on it, the better off you are, because you're bruising the paper and the paint is accepted differently then. So that's the value of doing a couple sketches, so you know where you want it. And you don't put the building here and say, oh, I want it there. You know where you want it on your paper. So that's the value of that. All right, now let me see if this will work now. Dry. Okay, I'm going to try one more time so I know what I'm getting. Not so bad. All right, I like that better. But you can see how you can get those highlights. So let's pick up a little, see if I can keep that going. And if the paint were even a little drier, those would stay really nice. It'd be like a glow in the water. You know how the ripples and the everything goes? So what I can do, hope maybe we'll try to accent them, is put a little blue. Let's try that. Okay, and then along here, I don't like that. We have to do more to that. Let's add Just a little interest of something else in here. I really don't care if it's really there or not. Okay, oh, I know. Let's put these lines in. I think is there a molding in the bottom? No. All right, so let's just do this now. There's a little guard fence that goes around part of this. And it had a little support, I think. So we'll do that. And then the same thing on this side. That little guardrail goes in front. And now, we need a little stronger paint. What I'm going to do, just because, is put a little highlight on this. Not a big one. I'm pretty much winding it up here, but I want to do two things because this still looks a little flat to me. So I'm taking some of my Paynes gray, watering it down. I need a clean spot here. Put a little, yeah, that's not working, is it? Here. Okay. I'm just going to take that Paynes gray and I'm going to run it right down. Whop, whop. I'm just dulling the color down. I want it to recede, and it's not receding. So there. Now I have that big value change. I'm going to put a little more shadow right here. Because, you know, and then in the morning when you get up and you look and you think, oh, yeah, no, I need more shadow there. I need lighter here. I need this there. So just doing that and that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little of this paint. And I'm going to put a little bit of the yellow in. Just to give it that a little bit of pizzazz. Go right up to there. So it has a little more life to it. Then I'm going to take a little bit of that and I'm going to put it on the front here too, on top of the red. So it has just a little more life to it also. And I don't like that. Oops.
So that's just a yellow that you're brightening that one?
Yeah. Then I'm going to take this and just bring it down and give it a little, so it's not quite so much in your face everything. So you can see how it's all blending a little bit and it's not going, oh boy, I'm first. I want it to, and I'm going to lighten the rough. I think I'm just going to lighten that as much as I can. I looked at it in reverse in the mirror, and you can automatically, almost immediately see what you want to do. This needed some work. I like that better. Now I'm going to take just a little bit of the green that I had here before and put a little more darkness just behind this little house. Because I don't want them the same value. I want them a little different. And soften the edge up here. Whoop, I want to do that. So now that house has a little more value change in it too. Pick up a little, put a little bit of it here just to give it a little more oomph. Let's pick up some of that red in the beach area. I want that little bit of glow. And I'm going to put a little bit just a dab of brightness here and there. See if I can get that. A little bit of this bright red. And I think we're pretty much finished. Just for kicks. Give it another little dimension. And I think we're done. Put a little blob in there. And I think we can call it finished. And I'll certainly in the morning come back and look at it and see if I want anything changed. Right along the coast, you know, you always get that little bit of light along the water's edge. And I like that. All right, what I'm going to do, just because I did lose a little of that.
Hey, Joe.
I'm going to put a little bit. Hey, Jim. Little bit of the white gleaming in the water. And for now, should we put some birds in there? What do you think?
Yeah.
All right, we'll put birds in and then we'll call it done. My And birds can be, they're kind of funny. All you need is a simple shape here and there, and you don't have to worry about it. They're not. All right, we're done. So, hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining me, and thanks again to the Art Council. Oh, wait, one more thing. I forgot to do this last time. I want to show the two girls, but when you're painting something and you want to see what it looks like, you're looking and think, oh, that's a little. But it's amazing when you put a mat around it, how it changes it. Does that make it look better? Okay, Joe, Belle, let me see yours. We're gonna do this. These are two very talented girls that have joined me here today. This is Joe's, and when matting, when you put a mat and a nice frame on a piece of artwork, it's just like putting a beautiful dress on a woman. She looks so much better. Think about it. Pretty, huh? Not so bad. Very nice. And then this is Belle's. This is the kind of thing, even when I would do this, doing my image on a photograph, I would do this because then you can really see what you want to get. Very nice. Good job, girls. There you go. So, think about if you just have an old mat, whether you're doing photography, whether you're doing whatever, if you want to see what it's going to look like, do that. And then you can change these things to, to anything you want. You can make it longer. Oops. So you know where you want that horizon line. You could go there, you could go here. You want a short horizon line, just not in the stark middle. You can see where it makes it the most interesting. Okay, thank you again for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Sleep well.